Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday Night Breakdown. Daniel Ratledge and Dave Forrester with you, going through all the action in another busy week in the British Basketball League. A dramatic week as well. Let's start with the biggest upset of the week back on Tuesday. Leicester Riders 54, Bristol Flyers 80. And this one, watching it back, was similar to the previous meeting they had at the weekend. Leicester struggling to score early, Flyers get out to a 9-point lead, and then Washington pulls them back in at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, Bristol did start well. Then they came out with a kind of a funny lineup at the end of the first quarter and had lots of big guys on the court. I think Thomas Edwards was playing the 3, Lockett the 2, and Teddy at the 1, and it kind of clogged them up a little bit. And Leicester used that defensive ability. I think Bristol shot probably 2 or 3 air balls in a row. Yes, Leicester used that defensive ability to get down at the other end, but it didn't actually change the path of the game that much, because kind of a similar thing happened in the second quarter as well.
Yeah, second quarter, Bristol get 10 up after 3 threes from Rodgers, and Leicester score the last 9 points of the first half to make it 33-33. And then start of the second half, Leicester pull away with Nelson, Henry and Johnson, get up 15 minutes to go. And you think, here we go. Leicester are going to do the same as they did at the weekend and just pull away from them.
Yeah, I think it was the Friday night that I think they played before. Was it Friday and the Tuesday they played?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's something that we might see in the playoffs as well. It becomes very difficult once you've kind of beaten a team for 6 quarters to continue to do it. You know, because at some point in time, a team is going to adjust, and at some point in time, they're going to come back at you. And Bristol's the reason I was a little bit frustrated with Bristol on their Friday night game because they're entirely capable of playing defense on that night the way they did in this game. And that came primarily around the fact that they knew that Connor Washington was playing 40 minutes. Josh Wilshere wasn't playing. Ben Mockford basically got the job, and Ben Mockford chased Connor Washington around. And I think eventually, Connor scored his last points in the first minute of the second half. After that, you know, they really shut down the point of attack, which meant that it was then somewhere else that Leicester had to go to get shots, to get scores. And they had some good looks, but they weren't in rhythm. They weren't the way they normally are. They didn't have any of their pet plays that they can go to when they need a basket, where, you know, they run Johnson off a Spanish screen and he pops out for a 3 and Crandall finds him, or the same with Lee. They didn't have any of that, so they had nothing easy. And eventually, I think Bristol's energy and Lockett as well in transition just gradually took them away. But it was all about their defense. And then the difficulty when you've got so many good players as Leicester have is that if a couple of them aren't firing, do you stick with them or do you find somebody else? How long can you wait? You know, how long do you keep going with them? And that's a balance, and it just got away from them in the second half. But it was the defense of Bristol that did it.
Yeah, Bristol scored the last 12 points of the third quarter. They were still only up 3 with eight minutes to go, but Leicester at that point just looked like they hit a wall, like they were done. Nothing, they couldn't get anything. You know, the shots that they put up were miles off. Bristol scored 13 in a row, and it was a question of how many they were going to win by.
Yeah, and the thing with Bristol is you're not going to beat them. You're rarely going to beat them with second shots because they're big. They do rebound the ball well. So you have to run your stuff to beat them. And as I say, Leicester didn't have their little cheat code. They didn't have the get out of jail card, the plays that they would normally run with their most comfortable unit, because that's quarterback by Crandall, and Washington had played 40 minutes or 38 minutes on Friday night and another 40 in this game. And eventually you saw it, you know, Mockford chasing him over the top of the screen, the big guy there, taking away the space, take away the pocket pass, and he struggles to see over the floor to throw the ball at the other corner the way that Crandall does. So the shooters don't quite get their shots in rhythm, and everything's just a beat off, and that's all it needs. And it only needs to happen for a quarter of a basketball game. And that would, Leicester played Bristol 6.5 quarters without it happening. But eventually they wore them down, happened for a quarter, game is over. And if that was a two-legged trophy, a two-legged knockout,
they win.
They win, you know, despite the fact that, you know, you would say Leicester outplayed them for 6 and a bit quarters.
Yeah. Leicester's lowest score since Rob's first season at 54. They shot 37% from the floor, 4 of 22 from 3.
Yeah,
L-
yeah. Go on,
I was
sorry.
just going to move it on to
Yeah.
London Lions 109, Surrey Scorchers 90 on Wednesday night. Still no Robinson. Liggins on the bench and coming onto the court this week. And I was watching this one back as well because I was doing a Euro Cup game live. And first quarter even, and it's a scoring race. And you think, well, that's a dangerous thing to do with London to go up and down and try and keep score with them. But then I was also thinking, I'm not sure how else Surrey could beat them if not that way.
Yeah, I don't think they could beat them that way. I'm not sure they could beat them anyway. Not in London, not at the Copper Box. Maybe at the Sports Park, maybe different. But at the Copper Box, where London are so comfortable, difficult. It's all London. You know, London's got an entourage. It's a bit of a circus situation, knowing what's going on there and trying to figure it out. Liggins came off the bench in this game. He hadn't played in the loss against Worcester, when they'd been held to 72. He didn't come off the bench straight away. Ikenwin came off the bench first. Spencer is now starting because Robinson isn't playing, but Dan Akodo, who has been playing very well, he appears to have been relegated below Spencer. And obviously, where as well is where's where will be a question that we'll be asking later.
Yeah.
So all a bit bizarre, but Surrey made a ton of threes. Surrey are playing 5 out, so they're playing with Lacey James as the centre and Theo at the 4. And offensively, it makes them a very potent team. It gives Tony Hicks a ton of space in which to work. But London has a lot of size, and it's not just the size in the big spot that matters, it's the size at the wings. So the Liggins and Williams and Parker give them that size, which means that they can get whatever shot they want against Surrey. James has to play basically the whole game, which is hard for him because Rickman's kind of hurt. And it was one of those situations whereby London were in control of the game, because of the tempo of the game, because of their confidence. And Dirk Williams obviously had one of his games whereby all the guys are looking for him. He's so comfortable shooting the shots that he's shooting so confident out in transition and pulling up for threes. That, you know, every time he makes a shot, it's a 3, but it looks like it's such an easy shot. It really shouldn't count for 2. You know, it shouldn't count for 3 because it's such a comfortable shot. You know, but it counts for 3, and he make 3 or 4 of them in a row. So yeah. Sorry, I think you'd probably say both teams were what they were. Surrey kept scoring. We've seen a number of games like that at the Copper Box this year where London have just scored teams off the court, and 105 to 90 is where it ends up, and no one's ever really in any doubt as to how it's going to end up.
No, they were 44-34 up after 14 minutes. They had an 8-1 start to the third quarter, and they were up 18 and just kept going from there. The shooting numbers were quite impressive, though. Dirk with his 35 points, he was 5 of 11 from 3. Tawia 6 of 7, Ali Hodgett 6 of 6, Parker 5 of 8, Ikenwin 4 of 6. When they're all hit, and you've got no chance.
Well, that's right, and you know that's the thing. You know, those big guys, 12 or 13. I don't actually think it helps London in the long term to have those big guys shooting like that, because I don't think it suits London to be throwing the ball into them and watching them go to work. But it certainly helps when the opposition have got, you know, a 6'6" centre, 6'7" centre starting, and you can throw those bodies at him. There's some stylistic things with London that we'll get onto with the next games, but as I say, I don't think they want to be going into the playoffs relying on the big guys to be kind of one-on-one scorers, because they're better than that in other areas.
Well, let's get on to the next game, Friday night, or early evening it probably was. London Lions 93, Sheffield Sharks 81. Robinson was there. He warmed up. He was on the score sheet, but he was a DNP still. Liggins into the starting lineup and nowhere to be seen. It was still pretty comfortable for them, really. I mean, Sheffield couldn't score in the early stages, and they were missing chippies around the ring, and London just eased out to a 14-4 lead. Yeah,
and I mean, I was actually in the arena. I got to go along, and you know, I was sitting next to Okoro and Ward Hibbert, who were there but weren't playing. And where wasn't, and no one seems to have suggested where he's been. We don't seem to know. It's all a bit weird, and I think it's sometimes something that the BBL kind of benefits from, but also loses out from, because we're all about pushing positive narratives, or narratives anyway. But there's also in sport, there's also negative narratives, or there's also intrigue in narratives. And if Harry Kane had refused to play on Sunday, which was what we think happened, you'd think it might be all over the papers, and you think, and if the person who had outed Harry Kane then wasn't playing the next week, you'd think that would be something of an issue as well. So sometimes the league may benefit from its lack of interest from the red top tabloids, but nevertheless, moving on. Kevin Ware wasn't there. He is actually a miss for them.
He is, yeah, particularly when Justin's not playing.
Justin's not playing in particular, but he's been an extra kind of scorer for them off the bench. And it might sound crazy given the amount of players that they have, but they don't really have anybody else who's like him. Now, Spencer's getting lots of minutes at the moment. He's starting, but he kind of changes the way. He's very different to Justin Robinson. When he played at London 2 years ago, he was very much an off guard who kind of came up and took over the ball and took over possessions. So it's not the same as Justin. And you see kind of a transference in the shot creation to Liggins, provided Liggins wants to play, obviously. And the thing about this game was that you could see from the first moment, I think it was Liggins' birthday.
No, it was his birthday on Wednesday. So it was 2 days later.
It was a Sky game, my fault.
Yeah,
you could see it from the very first. He guarded Hemsley, and they put him on the ball, and you could see he was in the stance. You could see he was totally connected to the game. The whole thing was just a totally different vibe to what had been there last Friday when he'd been thrown out against the Eagles. So I think. London had assessed that, without Helmsley scoring the ball regularly, Sheffield are not the most potent offensive team. What then happened was because of the effort to curtail Helmsley, Nichols got a lot of shots. Nichols is playing the stretch 4. He was 5 of 18 for the game. He didn't knock the shots down. He was knocked down. And basically, he's a critical guy for them because they've changed the way they play. They play with one big primarily now, be it Tuck, be it Coke, or be it eventually Marsden. Rarely do they have the two on the court, which means that, but generally it's always Nichols as the 4, and he's the one who can get whatever shot he wants, but he doesn't necessarily knock down whatever shot he wants. And when he wasn't hitting, and they were blanketing Helmsley, then kind of Sheffield are left with Lillard putting his head down and going to the rim against some very long London defenders.
I think they were 5 of 17 from inside the no charge circle in the first half, Sheffield.
And they missed layups. But pros don't just miss layups. They miss layups for a reason. They miss layups because they're playing against a team who's a little bit longer, a little bit deeper. They're having to work a little bit harder to get there, to get to their spots. And I think without Helmsley giving them that extra, the game for Sheffield was a very similar pattern to a lot of their games this year, which have been that they go down early, then they kind of hang around, but not certainly on the road, but not close enough to actually kind of get within striking distance. But you never feel the game's absolutely gone.
No.
But when I think Lockhart made a 3 at the end of the third quarter, it was a 15-point game. And you just couldn't see any way back for them.
No, and they never really threatened to get it back into single figures. Williams carried on his good shooting form, another 5 of 6 from 3, 25 points. Liggins 18 points and 10 assists. So let's move down to Surrey, where the Scorchers were playing the Raiders, and it finished 90-98 in favour of Plymouth. Raiders had a 10-1 finish to the third quarter, and you think they're taking over the game, but Scorchers come back with a 10-0 start to the second quarter and got themselves in front in this game.
Yeah, it was an up and down game, and I mean it was there for Surrey because Plymouth were playing without Porter Button, playing without eBay, and that basically brings the rosters closer together in relation to matchups, in relation to the level of play. And also they played each other a few times this year, and Surrey really should have an idea as to how to guard them. A typical game at the sports park, up and down, teams scoring, not a tremendous amount of defense. Plymouth in particular in the first half were below their standards. They were playing as I say, without eBay, without Porter Button. So there was some difficulties with the rotations, which were a little bit different. Interesting to see PJ play more with Hamilton at the 5. Obviously, without eBay, he had the minutes to do that. But kind of, he certainly finished the game with Hamilton at the 5 and Neighbour at the 4. And that's really quite an interesting kind of group, because that's a group that they might need later on in the season. I think it's a game that got away for Surrey.
Yeah.
Certainly they were up late in the game, and
well, they kept the lead they had at halftime until late in the third, when Dusha, Beastie, Morcell all hit threes, and Plymouth went 6 up. But then again, right at the early in the fourth quarter, Teo hits one, Kalen hits one from behind the arc. They get back in front, and with 4 minutes to go, they're up 5. And that is a position, given where they are in the standings, that you've got to see that out with 4 minutes to go.
I think they had 2 points the rest of the way. And,
one score, in the last 3:40.
It was really the reason that they lost the game was because defensively they weren't on the same page. They weren't on the page the way that Plymouth were. And Plymouth finished off with McGill, who was excellent again, who has this rare ability in BBL terms to go as hard to his left as he does to his right. Hard left hand dribble, hard right hand dribble. He's almost ambidextrous in his quickness, which is rare. Can turn the corner going both ways. But they finished off with McGill and Morcell and Ubiaro and Hamilton and Neighbour, which is about the quickest lineup they can put out there. And that's because Surrey are playing with quick lineup as well. But Creon kind of had to change. We had 2 minutes to go. He changed, and he put Hildreth and Raftopoulos back in. Hicks committed a dumb foul. They gave away some dumb fouls in when they were in the penalty in those last 5 minutes, and they utterly failed to deal with the screen and roll, which they faced the whole game, to the point whereby Lacey James was matched up with Neighbour, which was interesting because you'd think he would be better matching with Hamilton, and Teo was matching up with Ashley. There might have been a bit of individual personal knowledge, in that. But what happened was, I think there was a 1 point game with a minute and a half to go, and Dusha drives to his left down the middle, and Dusha's always going to pass in that situation. Teo kind of is half a step towards corralling the screen and roll, but Lacey James is on the baseline and Will Neighbour's in the corner, and Lacey James has still got a foot in the paint because he's a 5. He's been playing the centre, and Will Neighbour is standing out in the corner. And LVC, the one thing he can do is he can throw a pass across court anywhere on the mark, and he throws it on the mark to Will Neighbour, and Will Neighbour, Lacey James sprints out at him, but Will Neighbour knocks it down as you would. So that's that. And then Surrey kind of go they miss a couple of chippies, but it's all one kind of pass and drive. And then the next time down, the play which brought the game open, again, screen and roll at the top with Dusha and Hamilton. Again, Hamilton, this time Teo switched on to Dusha and Hildreth was on Hamilton. And Teo kind of switched on to Dusha as he came across, which he didn't really need to do. Dusha threw the court through a bolt across the court to Morcell in the other corner. Morcell's man closes him out the way he's meant to, but Lacey James is on the perimeter guarding Will Neighbour on the strong side. There's nobody under the basket, so Morcell quick fake, and he's got one left hand dribble, attacks the rim. Teo is still out there with Ashley at the 3-point line. Hildreth, whose technically cover it was, probably wasn't expecting the switch on the screen at the top, so he can't get there. And it's a cheap foul call, 3-point play, and that's a 5-point game, and the game is done. So it's those little things about being on a string together and knowing how you're defending at the end, which lets Surrey down in this game. From what I could see, they're not going to be a great defensive team with that kind of lineup in, with a small lineup in, but they have to do a better job of taking away the things that you have to take away. And the 2 things you have to take away is a straight line drive for Mike Morcell and an open 3-pointer for Will Neighbour. And it didn't take away either of those at 6 points in a minute and a half game done.
And Plymouth, continue to roll on. McGill has been fantastic for them in the last month of the season. Morcell continuing to score, and all the guys you mentioned there got into double figures. Hamilton 14, 12 and 6.
The only thing I worry about for Plymouth is that it's actually happening a bit too early.
Yeah.
they got, that they're at that point whereby they're rolling. They think they're going to beat everybody. They may well be able to beat everybody, but they've got another month and a half to do it for.
Yeah,
In the BBL, with the peaks and troughs of a season, it won't be easy for them to maintain this wave for the next 12 months.
And that's the thing, because you sort of look at it and you look at McGill over the last month, and he's been one of the best players in the league, but for the 15, 16 games before that, he was 10 points a game and shooting 40% from the floor.
Yeah, and you get to the point, so now he's shown himself. So what will happen is, or should happen, it'll be a question as to whether he's able to handle it, is that teams will start to defend him differently, and he will start to be the first name on the scouting report, which will then require another change for Plymouth in relation to how they play, which is why Surrey had a real shot at this game, because without Porter Bunton and without eBay, that is a significant level of perimeter and interior defense taken away. And also it means that if you can hold down any one of those guys, you hold McGill down, you hold Morsell down, you hold Hamilton down, or you hold Neighbour down, you might only have to hold down one of them to win that game.
Yeah,
they weren't able to do any. They weren't able to hold down.
So let's go to Bristol. Bristol 72, Worcester 77. Again, I'm watching it back, but this was a bit scrappy, I thought, in the first half. Not a lot between the two teams. Ends up a 1-point game at the half.
Yeah, again, Bristol is a very difficult team to get a handle on, because they, on the face of it, have every piece that you need. They have the size, they have the wing scorer, they have the athletes, they have the muscle, they have 10 deep, and they have two solid ball handlers, and they have one lights out shooter in Mockford and another one in Rogers who's been playing really well. And Worcester are kind of the opposite at the moment, because they're struggling through their injuries. They haven't got Anderson. They are playing a ton of games in a short period of time, and they're kind of the scrappy guys who are just hanging around in basketball games, thanks to the smartness of their guards and their forwards and their coaching, which is basically keeping them in games. Insofar as the pace that they're playing at, they're playing slower, they're playing through the post, etc. And you'd hope that Bristol coming off Tuesday night would have been kind of up-paced by it, or would have had a kind of something in their step, but they didn't. And nobody really made any shots to any real degree early. And it was a game which just basically came down to who made plays at the end.
Yeah. Well, let's spin it forward, because the Flyers had an 11-2 start, and they had a bit of a lead, but then Kimball and McSwiggan hit some threes, and then Kimball scores 7 points in a 9-0 finish, and it's a 7-point lead going into the fourth quarter. Bristol come back with Teddy hitting a three, Ben Mockford hitting a three, and again, as you say, 1-point game. It comes down to who can make a play at the end.
Yeah, and Worcester executed better at the end. Jordan Williams made some plays at the end, but you just don't quite know. I still don't know who Bristol's go-to guy is, what their go-to play is, where they're going to go when they need a basket at the end. There are so many guys, they're quite egalitarian the way that they play. Insofar as everybody can shoot the ball, everybody gets their touches. But they don't, as of yet, have a pecking order that I can see. Sometimes it's Baker. It's almost like every single time down, we're going to take what the defense gives us. The problem is, at the end of the games, the defense might give you shots that you don't really want your guys to be shooting.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. They dropped the game they should have won.
Yeah. Yeah, and they had a shot at it. Backnet makes it a 3-point game, and they ran that final play, and Teddy had actually gone inside the 3-point line before they fouled him, and I was sort of thinking, oh, you probably could have let him go because you're up 3 anyway. Yeah. So they get the sideline ball again, and he had a reasonable look at it, but it's not one that you're guaranteed to make.
No, and he's not the guy who, you would want the ball preferably in Mockford's hands in that situation. It was from memory, there was a good bit of defense played on the ball. I'm playing this back in my head now. And they kind of made the scrapped up the play a little bit.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
And
then he's coming back, and he has, I think it was Williams on the side of him.
Yeah.
With a hand up. It was, as I say, it wasn't the easiest shot, but it was a clean enough look. And sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't.
Yeah. I think that's probably fair enough.
Okay, so let's move on to Newcastle Eagles 98, Glasgow Rocks 78, and obviously the Americans have left for visa reasons, we've now been told. And Gareth even talking about, trying to convince them to come back next year. Eagles with a 10-0 run to lead 14-5 after 5 minutes, and those of us in the commentary box are thinking this could be a very, very long night at this rate.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a great move by the Rocks if we had draft picks, but we don't. So, but it is what it is. If the Rocks told those players that they weren't going to find a way of extending their visas for a month and that they had to go home, then they have to go home. I'm not overly impressed with the organisation that gets to that point, though. As I know it's not the most complicated process this year to do that. In relation to the game, very May kind of game, very blah game. Glasgow did their best to throw Newcastle the ball for the first 7 minutes of the game.
There was a lot of turnovers.
In fact, if there was a way to commit a turnover that they didn't, I can't think of it. And you kind of, it probably gave Newcastle a slight false sense of security in relation to the way they played throughout, but they were antsy as well. You say, well, could it be Newcastle's defense turning Glasgow over? Probably Glasgow's offense throwing the ball away. Let's be blunt. And then, as kind of happens in games like that, as it gets scrappier, the team that thinks it should be winning gets by a lot, gets more frustrated when it's not, and suddenly the team that's the underdog kind of starts making some shots.
Yeah.
And Newcastle's defense was not particularly good in this game, even though they turned the ball over 20 times. They gave up 13 threes, including 5 to Murray, 3 or 4 to Malcolm.
3, I think it was, yeah.
And 3 to Malcolm and a couple to Bunyan. And also 3 to Quady.
Yeah.
And they're the 4 guys that you really wouldn't want shooting the ball. You don't mind if Van Stowers is shooting a 3. You don't mind if Brandon's shooting 3s. But for those guys who are the 4 main shooters on their team to make 11 threes between them, you have to be wondering, why are we giving that many shots up? That's what they do. And that allowed them to hang around. And then we got to the second half, and I think at the end of the first half, Newcastle went on a little run.
Yeah, they scored the last 11 points to lead 42-34 at the half.
And in the beginning of the third quarter, Glasgow were able to kind of keep it close, but we never really felt the game was in jeopardy. Newcastle still some rotation issues to figure out in relation to the bigs, and Quady made those threes when Defoe was playing at the 4, having previously played at the 5. So then he's not acclimated to running out on Quady, so that depends on the kind of the balance of when the bigs play together, and they probably ended up having to play Edwards and Fletcher longer than they really should have in that game because of the fact that they couldn't quite put it away as quickly as they wanted. Glasgow actually, they made shots, they moved the ball, they played well, they're just undermanned, just undermanned and threw the ball away a lot.
Yeah, they got better at not turning the ball over. As I think they only ended up with 19, which is still a lot. But as you say, 7 in the first 5 minutes or something. You're thinking they're going to
go. To go in to have 13 and a half and to go in only 8 points down and actually be 3 points up until 2 minutes beforehand is remarkable. It says kind of a lot about the way you're playing defense, but also a lot about the way the other team's playing as well, because it demonstrates they're not finishing particularly well. A bit of a blah game, I'm afraid. Apart from I was glued to on the television, obviously.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, the Rocks basically now just have to shoot like that every week, don't they? Just to get anywhere near, they've got to make 12, 15 threes every game.
Well, they do. I mean, the reality is that they have guys who are every player they've got is properly on a BBL course and has at least one solid BBL skill. Some of them have more. Quady, big body, good shooter. Jack Donme, athletic inside, can score. Murray, excellent, solid basketball IQ, knocks down threes, does little things for his team. Bunyan can run a team. Brandon can get to the hoop and can be aggressive and can score at the hoop. There's a couple of Van Sowers who can be kind of an undersized four, but going to play hard, make moves off the dribble. They've all got something that, and Malcolm can shoot. So they've all got something they can do. The difficulty is that when good teams take away the one thing that those guys can do, and suddenly
where do they go?
Dommy's catching the ball outside, and Brandon's being dared to shoot threes, and Bunyan's being harassed 40 minutes, and and Quady's being pressurized and taken off and attacked off the dribble. What happens then? That's the problem. They don't have a get out of jail card to do that. So yeah.
Let's go to Saturday then. Plymouth Raiders 88, Cheshire Phoenix 83, back to back for the Raiders, and obviously no Ross still for Cheshire. Plymouth really struggled to score early on. They were 15-7 down after 5 minutes. They did manage to get it back to 3 at the end of the first quarter, and then made some shots in the Hamilton made a 3, Beastie made a 3, Neighbour made I think 2 threes or two long range 2s, I can't remember now. It was a 16-2 run, and suddenly they're 12 points up and in cruise mode.
Yeah, there's an interesting dynamic with Plymouth, because he has every base covered with the team that he has. And in this game, he took more sell out early, and it might have been foul trouble. I wasn't listening to the commentary; I was just watching it without it. Brought in Dusha, and that kind of frees up McGill. So when Dusha comes in the game, McGill's different, because he basically becomes a de facto 2 guard, and you can see you almost see a click in him that he's looking to score and push the ball every time down. And obviously he's got Ubiaro for energy. They had both those guys back in this game, Porter Button and eBay, which is I was a bit confused about. If they can't play Friday, why can't they play Saturday? Maybe there's a reason. There must be something, but that's always seemed fairly bizarre to me. That he was able to do that. Cheshire hamstrung without Ross. It really is. It's tough because McCall has to do a lot of the ball handling. They rely on Gordon to help them as well, but Gordon is really struggling to contribute anything offensively, scoring wise. And that isn't so much a problem when you have Ross and McCall. But when you don't have Ross, then you need to find scoring from elsewhere. Brian Ammerning struggled in this game as well. And obviously, they're having to play him because they don't have Ross. They have to play him. They only have 6 guys, really. They have to play him together with Lull at times, and that can be a bit difficult as well from a chemistry and spacing perspective. Carey did okay. Carey was aggressive and got to the rim at times. But it was one of those games whereby, you were just waiting for Plymouth to put their foot on the pedal. And when they did, there wasn't, Cheshire just on demand. They played, they did what they can do. They certainly gave it their best shot. But from about the 3-minute mark in the third quarter, my interest kind of waned, because you could see where the game was going. And you couldn't see Cheshire being able to get enough stops, given the way that McGill is playing, given that Hamilton is back, and Hamilton is getting close to very, very well kind of linking up with McGill. You can see it. You can see a significant progress in their understanding on the court. So when is it Hamilton's turn? And when is it time for the ball to move? When is it time to go to screen and roll? When we're going to throw it into Ashley? That type of thing. And once they get that down, and PJ figures out his, who's not going to play, because that's a problem he's going to have. He's got 11 players. And 12 if Lawrence ever comes back. And I know we say this every week. Once PJ figures out who's not going to play or who his lineups are, and I think he's pretty close to doing it, because they've won 17 of the last 19 games.
They lost to London.
Then you can only see them getting better. The only fear for them is, as I say, they peaked a bit early.
This finished a 5-point game, but it wasn't really a 5-point game.
No.
They made a few shots in the last minute there, Cheshire, to cut the gap. Let's move on to Sunday. And Surrey Scorchers 87, Newcastle Eagles 67, and the
I'm
Eagles.
not talking about this game, Dan. That's it. Somebody's gone.
Yeah.
We'll move on. No.
The Eagles really struggled offensively early on, missing shots.
Slow down. No, they just really struggled.
Yeah, they
They
did.
just really struggled. Take away the offensively out, they struggled in every part of the game. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So I mean, they were 11-4 down after 3 minutes, and it looks like one of those 2:00 Guildford games. But they did stay overnight, so it's not like they travelled down.
No.
They managed to sort of just rally a little bit, cut it to 2 late in the first quarter, but then Macklemore hits a 4-point play. They get 10 points in a row. It's 29-17, and to be honest with you, they were pretty comfortable all the way through. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it was the kind of home game that Creon's probably wanted for the last 3 years, because they dominated it. Newcastle weren't. Say that right. Some of there's probably Fletcher, Defoe, maybe Fluger, maybe those guys looked like they were ready to play. I don't think anybody else on the Eagles team looked like they were ready to play. They went. Maxwell missed 3 or 4 layups in the first 3 minutes, and obviously he's guarding Lacey James, so Lacey James is pulling outside and knocking stuff down. So if he's not finishing it around the rim, you're giving up a lot at the other end. Gordon got a dumb foul early on Teo, and then got another one towards the beginning of the second quarter. And then at the beginning of the game was ultimately won at the beginning of the first quarter, the second quarter, and the third quarter. Because the first quarter, we're up 9. Then beginning of the second quarter, as you say, there was a 10-point run. Newcastle had a very strange lineup on the court with Edwards, Fluger, Sayers, Defoe, and Adenikin, which really didn't give them much spacing, didn't give them much, shot creation at all. And you would probably, looking back, they'd probably been better going smaller at that point, maybe getting Lasker in a bit earlier, because Fletcher was out of the game with 2 fouls. And so it becomes a 12-point game, and then it kind of remains that to halftime. And then beginning of the third quarter, the Eagles starting 5 comes out again, no doubt under a message that you really need to be a bit better now than you were at the beginning of the first half, and they weren't. In relation to Edwards, he played 35 minutes on Friday night. He's playing 35 minutes every game, so you just wonder if he's, just a little bit worn down.
1 of 7 today.
1 of 7, because there's no reason. There's nothing in Surrey's defense which is something which would stop him. But there's also a thing, when you win 3 games in a row, relatively comfortably, you're feeling quite good about yourself. And sometimes you lose track of the fact that, hang on, we won 3 games, but we beat London without Justin Robinson and Liggins. We beat Cheshire without Ross. We beat Glasgow without their Americans.
Yeah.
They really shouldn't, having been beaten at Surrey 2 weeks ago, they shouldn't have been as flat as that for that game. That should have been quite personal to them, having lost 1 game. So, Surrey, excellent insofar as Creon cut his rotations down. He played Hicks a lot more. Hicks dominated the basketball game because Newcastle couldn't guard the screen and roll. Again, the stretch 4, Teo. The guys in commentary mentioned, I think Creon mentioned before on the interview that, he's not playing his natural position. I think that is his natural position. In the modern game, I think as a stretch 4, he is a tough cover. And Newcastle really struggled to deal with Hicks on the screen and roll, allowing him to get to the middle, and then Ogundenbe spotting up in the corners. And when James is pulling them out, they're 5 out and very difficult to defend. And as I say, other than Fletcher and Fluger to a certain degree, and I think Defoe was only a -3 in his 25 minutes. So basically, they lost the 15 minutes, so he wasn't on the court by 20.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the Eagles guys can turn around and say that was a particularly good performance.
No, Hicks was 16 and 11. Teo was 4 of 6 from the 3-point line.
The thing with that is that Tony Hicks is a scorer. He is a good scorer. He can get to the rim. He can finish. He is really good. Tony Hicks, if Tony Hicks has 11 assists on you, then there's somewhere in your coverages that aren't right, because Tony Hicks's first option is generally to look to score. And what they weren't able to stop him scoring, but they weren't. It was almost like it was like watching Fletcher in reverse. They weren't able to stop him scoring, but they weren't able to stop him dishing either. And as I say, they never got a handle on either to go look for an offensive lineup or look for a defensive lineup. And at the moment, they don't really have a lineup which is both offense and defense as well as they would like.
The second biggest victory for Surrey over Newcastle. Last only bigger one was in 2012, April 2012. They won by 24. So let's go.
Well, we'd won the league by then, though, hadn't we?
Well, it doesn't change the.
No, it doesn't change the
doesn't
stat.
change the
No,
margin of victory.
No, I'm not taking the 24. I don't remember that. I don't remember it because we also won the league by then.
100 to 76. It was like the 20th of April, if I remember rightly, 2012.
2012. Yeah, that was a clean sweep. Yeah, yeah, sorry. That's all right. I don't. You see, that is now exorcised from my brain. A game which doesn't matter. Yeah. So anyway, move on. Sorry.
It's still in the spreadsheet. Let's go to Worcester. Worcester Wolves 85, London Lions 93 after overtime. Obviously, still all the players missing that were missing from previous games: Anderson, Ware, Robinson. And I almost just want to spin this right to the end because there was really not very much in it. Lions would get out to 8-point lead, and Worcester would pull it back, and there really wasn't much in it. And it comes down to the end of the game, and again, playmaking.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of interesting things in this game in relation to lineups. Parks played very well. He was very effective, 15 points, but he couldn't get on the floor at the end. And Matt couldn't play him. He had Burns and Williams on at the end. And Burns was also effective as your stretch four. Again, it's something I keep coming back to, the importance of having an effective stretch four and the spacing that provides. So Burns made, I think Burns had 21, 22 points. And given that they're a bit down on guards, Wilkins played quite a lot. Elan didn't play that much. Anderson isn't playing. You know, to get 21 from Burns and to get
24 and 7 he was off the bench, 8 for 11 shooting.
And also from Parks 15 or 17, something like that.
17, yeah.
That's a guy who couldn't get on the court at the end. So that they're the decisions that a coach has to make. This guy's playing well, but can I have him on the floor? And the reason he couldn't have him on the floor is because of London's lineup again, whereby they have Parker stretching you out to the 3-point line. They have Liggins, who's watching the game today, is primarily playing point guard. You know, you'd have to say. I mean, Spencer's maybe dribbling the ball over half court, but it's all about Liggins. When in the half court, it's coming back to him. They didn't run many screen and rolls for Spencer. You didn't see him creating much. And when Spencer wasn't on the court and it was like a Kodo or a Lockhart, then it's Liggins. It's all Liggins. Now Liggins played 42 minutes in this game, so he's obviously making up for the ones he didn't play last week. So he does that, and then we get to the end of the game, and yet again, both teams trying to lose.
Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it? Because Boutneck misses a 3, and then he comes up with the steal, and then there's a scrappy play, and I think it was Kimball.
Kimball throws it away.
There were 2 turnovers. Yeah, the second one there for Worcester, I can't remember. It was about 13 seconds to go. They've come up with the ball, and it was 2-on-1, and they threw it away.
Yeah, Kimball had a little bit of blood to the brain, and just thought he had a layup. Thought there was a layup there, and there wasn't. There the stop, and we end up with the scores tied. I think
scores tied. Lions have the ball, running the clock down. Boutneck commits a foul with 4.4 seconds to go.
It was a great foul because Liggins was actually attacking at that point. Liggins had the ball, he was attacking, and he got him on the dribble 30 feet away, so he couldn't throw it up. And he made them throw it in from the sideline. And that is, it's a smarter foul as you're going to find, because they weren't in the penalty. That was a 4th foul. And then obviously we call a timeout. We play the timeout game, and then we call a timeout. And I think Spencer was putting the ball in. He couldn't find anyone to throw it to.
No.
And the amount of times that happens, as you said on Twitter, is remarkable.
Yeah.
It's almost to the point whereby the brave coaching is just not to call it.
Yeah.
Brave coaching, you sort out, guys. Let the players do it, because then you don't have the opposition think about how we're going to switch everything and draw it up. People have of all of that, so they turn it over.
5-second violation. So now Worcester calls a timeout, moves the ball into the front court with 4.4 seconds to go, and obviously the primary option was to get it to Kimball. But actually, Jordan Williams posts up. He's the only one down there, and he's in a great spot. And there's 4 seconds for him to work. Well, I'm thinking, throw it down to the block.
I'm thinking, to be honest, at that point, I do not want the guy that Liggins is guarding.
Yeah, which was Kimball.
Basketball.
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking I'm going to take him out of the game, because I know I'm going to struggle to get a good one-on-one look on Liggins. Because he has the length, he has the athleticism. He's an XG League Defensive Player of the Year, you know, and he was locked in the game. He played 38 minutes, you know. So, yeah, it would have been a wrinkle. I think Vince had called the timeout as well.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I never quite figure out, you know, obviously was on the sidelines for a while, but just looking at a formation of guys, I never really quite figure out what you can discern from that to call the time.
We are celebrating the 22nd anniversary on Friday of Sheffield Manchester, which of course had the 2 timeouts in that situation as well.
And I get that, but I just it's like your defensive principles are okay. Are we going to switch? Are we going to switch screens? Are we going to chase people over? That's it primarily, you know. I suppose the only information you could usefully glean is who's taking the ball out. Yeah. Because then you would decide who you want to put on the ball. Yeah. That's a useful point you could get. But anyway, he called it, and Liggins sniffed out the player, or snuffed it out, and it went to overtime, and then Burns. Then they kind of traded in overtime a little bit. Burns and Parker attacked, but London just had a bit more depth, and Liggins
makes that 3 with I think it was.
I felt a bit for Henry Wilkins, because Henry Wilkins is doing what he's meant to do. But Henry Wilkins is probably 6'3", you know, and DeAndre Liggins is looking at him thinking, been going at guys like you for however long, and he's absolutely comfortable. So he takes his pop to the right 3, nails it, game over. You know, it's just sometimes you just need the bodies. You have to have the bodies. You have to be able to match up physically to get into people's heads. And unfortunately, I don't think Worcester had that at that position. If you look at it, I mean, it's the one spot they don't have. They've got the guards. They've McSwiggan's playing a little bit, but I'm not sure how healthy he is. And he's also a little bit naive defensively as well. And then they've got the guards and the bigs, but they don't have the wings.
Yeah. So a good win for London in the end, and it could have easily been a defeat, but they keep their title hopes going. Glasgow Rocks 79, Bristol Flyers 87, and again, this is another one where Flyers get out to a good start. They have an 18-2 run. They're up by 15, and you think they're just going to sail away with it. But credit to Rocks again; they made a few threes and.
Yeah, I didn't see the first half. I was watching the London game. Caught a bit of the second quarter. Well, caught most of the third quarter, and actually watched kind of it down to when it was decided, which was about 3-minute mark in the game. Glasgow made shots. You know, they got play. Again, the guys who do things well did things well. Jack Donnelly was full of energy. Bunyan knocked down some shots. Brandon got to the rim again, and he really is getting very, very good at finishing around the rim and giving them that degree of physicality that every team needs. You know, and Gareth and Van Sowers, they're kind of, sometimes when you're not subbing that much, you're playing as a unit, you get comfortable with each other, the ball starts moving to where the spots are. They kind of ran out of gas in the beginning of the fourth quarter because they never quite got over the hump in the third quarter.
So in the third quarter, they had an 11-0 start to cut it to 5, 45-50, and then Josh and Teddy both hit threes, and it was back out to 11, and then the Rocks hit a couple at the end from Murray and Bunyan, and they got it down to a 1-point game, and it's still only 3 with 8 to play, but then Baker basically took the game over, scored 8.
But it was. I say they lost legs. Jack Donnelly missed 2 or 3 consecutive layups, bunnies at the rim. He missed one. He got his own rebound, missed it again. Then the next time down, he made a nice spin move to his left hand and missed the layup. And they came down the other end and they made threes off them, or they made layups off them. Can't remember. And suddenly, what should have been a 3 or 4 point game becomes an 8 or 9 point game. And at that point, kind of. Glasgow had blown themselves out. They played so hard to get back that they didn't quite have it in it. It was watching Jack Donnelly miss those shots. You know, that was nothing to do with his skill level. That was just to do with his legs. So they weren't quite as cohesive with Malcolm on the court. Brandon came off the court and Malcolm went on the court, and Malcolm gives them another shooter, but Brandon gave them a little bit more physicality, which I think they needed at that time. and Pondo wasn't playing, so Quady was the seventh guy. I didn't have anybody else. And Bristol just had a few more and a little bit better guard play at the end. Teddy knocked down shots. Wilshire knocked down shots. Mockford wasn't playing again. So, again, that was with a little bit more rotation, a little bit more depth, a little bit more scoring. Glasgow probably don't end up 16 points down in that game, and they've got a shot at it. But then again, maybe they don't have the cohesion, which means that they wouldn't have played so well in the third quarter when they came back.
Yeah.
Bristol, it's not a bad week for Bristol. Ultimately, if you told them, Leicester, Worcester, and trip to Glasgow, we're going to win 2 out of 3. That I think they would have took that. They've now got 10 legitimate players there, who are all apart from Mockford, maybe appear to be healthy. Their issue is going to be finding the right groups of them. And again, when you've got 10 guys, it tends to be about who doesn't play, not who does. Yeah, you don't need 10 to win.
Well, they need to find a way of winning at home as well, because they're actually 7-5 on the road. So they need to find somewhere. It's bizarre, because normally you would think they'd be pretty good down there. But
well, it's quite loud down there when there are people there. But perhaps not so when there's not.
No, let's go on to the final game of the evening. Manchester Giants 87, Leicester Riders 90. Gino Crandall with a return. We even saw Mo Walker on the court for a couple of minutes for Leicester, having suffered what at the time was thought to be a season-ending injury, but he's recovered from the surgery quicker than expected. Garamipour still missing for Manchester, and early on, Whelan was scoring for the Giants. They were trading baskets up and down, and then around the first break, Walker on the court gets his first score in the league for forever, I would imagine. And Leicester have a 17-4 run and open up a 10-point lead. And you think, oh, this is the moment again. What's Manchester's response? And their response was through Satchel, who just absolutely caught fire in the second quarter.
Yeah, first message of this game is, never trust a coach. a little Italian bird, a little Italian-American bird on Friday night may have told me that there was no way in the world that Gino Crandall was playing on Saturday and Sunday. And it was all a little bit bizarre because I saw him in the warm-ups and you watched him and he's just using his left hand and, and he's got his hand in a little bit of a sling. And then he's in the starting lineup and he has one possession.
I think it was a mistake.
I think that's all
Washington had walked out as if he was starting. So I think
they put him on the sheet wrong.
Put him in the book wrong,
So that's all I can suggest, because it was a bit bizarre, because Gino went and stood in the corner and guarded somebody, and then he came out again. And you were thinking, I was trying to figure out if this was some heinously clever psychological ploy.
I think it was an error in the book.
I think it was an error in the book, But then he comes back, and it was a really interesting game because of that, because and you say that about Walker as well, and just dealing with Leicester for a moment, it was an important game for them, because they need that, especially having London won that game against Worcester. They need that cushion. You don't want to feel that somebody is on your tape.
Then their next 4 games, Leicester, bearing in mind they're only 3 wins ahead of London, their next 4 games are Worcester, who beat them last time they played, Plymouth, Newcastle, London. So
that was a big win.
When you look at the schedules, Leicester have the hardest schedule left. So they need to win. They need to beat Worcester, and they probably need to win at least one of the other 3, probably 2.
So this is why this was such a big game, and it wasn't going to be a gimme game either. And the Crandall thing was interesting because as the game went on, he played more. He was still, to my mind, impacted, but he's so capable and dexterous that he can impacts the rest of the team, around him. But of course, what happened was he ended up splitting minutes with Washington.
So it was almost like a reverse role, wasn't it?
So what you get is you think, oh, Crandall's great, that's brilliant. But then you're thinking, I've got this guy who's playing out of his skin, who's not on the court because he's back. So if Gino is at 60%, do I play him when I've got Connor at 100%? And that's a hell of a dilemma for a coach. because when everybody's healthy, you know what the pecking order of your team is. But when they're not healthy, you're constantly balancing, what do I need? Who's getting this? Who's getting that? And he's going to have the same thing with Walker. And because today Walker came in when Fraser picked up 2 fouls.
2 fouls, yeah.
So it was an easy sub.
I actually wondered the question of, would he have come in if that second foul wasn't called?
No, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have. Because I think it was an easy sub for that purpose. Because no one need to keep him in. You've got a third centre. But in that game, we go down the line. Nelson Henry played 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Rob only plays one centre at any time. They're not playing together. Yeah. So Fraser and Walker play 10 minutes between them. So then that gives you an issue with how you're going to distribute those minutes, because is a 60% or 70% Walker better than 100% Fraser? Yeah. And I tell you, I know what Walker will think. Yeah. I know what Fraser will think. And not both of them can't be right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's going to be interesting moving forward. It's the abundance of riches, the kind of the overwhelming amount of players that you have. Because when they signed Fraser, obviously they didn't think that Walker was coming back.
Walker's coming back now.
So it gives you what all coaches would say is a kind of a good problem. Yeah. Generally, coaches just mean it's a problem.
It's a problem. Yeah.
Because there is no such thing as a coach's good problem. You want to avoid having any problems at all. So the game itself, having said that, really quite a good game to watch. Manchester's effort level is higher, noticeably. Their defensive, am I all right? Their defensive,
yeah, no, it's my light.
Yeah, the defensive ability is higher, and they are pressurizing the basketball better, and they're getting back on defense better. No question of any of those things. They've always had scorers. Now, Leicester put Anderson or Heron on Cassell, so Cassell couldn't shoot over the top of them because they got burned once before where he did that. And they basically took Cassell out the basketball game, or took his pet shots out of the basketball game with their size. They struggle to guard Whelan, who is just a dynamite scorer off the dribble. Not a great shooter yet.
Well, they did better than the game at Leicester earlier in the season, where he had 30 odd.
But he puts pressure on the defense. Yeah. I mean, he was 2 of 10 from the 3-point line, so his shooting is probably the weakest part of it. But getting them scoring, they struggled to guard him, and then Satchel just went off. Yeah, Satchel just he is a scorer. Clearly, is a scorer. They didn't really get a handle on him early enough, and he was playing the stretch 4. And they were pick and popping him, so he could just set the screen and then go and kind of roll away and wait for the guy to get back to him. And then a couple of times he just shot it because he could, because there's no hand up. Because they weren't expecting him to shoot it. And he's one of those guys who clearly can just go off and make a ton of shots. Yeah. And 36 in the game.
He had 19 at halftime. He was 7 for 7, 5 of 5 from behind the arc, and then you're in trouble then, because, as you say, he's always looking to shoot. Now in the second half they put Lee on him for a bit, because obviously he's very long, Lee. It's much harder to shoot over, but by that point he's already flowing, and they did slow him a bit. I mean, a bit, but he still made shots.
He made shots, and it was an interesting game because you kept feeling that Leicester were about to blow it out. Yeah. And they got as far as like 7 or as far as 10.
Yeah. Well, they got to 10 with 6 to play, and you think, they've probably seen it off now. And then Wandier hits a couple of threes.
Yeah, and that's the thing, they've got scorers. So Johnson fouls himself out on a stupid technical. Yeah. That lets Wandier come in, and what that means is that Manchester probably have their most, from a scoring perspective, their most cohesive 5, because they have Cassell and Whelan at the guards, who are both scoring threats. They have Wandier on the wing. They have Satchel, who's making everything as the 4, and then you have Ulf, who's rebounding everything.
Cleans it up for them.
Cleaning it up. So Ulf's getting them extra possessions. So there's no spacing issues. There's no issues with rules on the court. As to Hudson got injured, so he wasn't on the court. So there's no. You only had those 5 guys to play. So those guys know that they're playing, and. This was the Crandall thing, because he made some plays, Crandall, but he also put some shot attempts up that you wouldn't ordinarily see him put up, where he drove into traffic, and it kind of wasn't very close. It wasn't the greatest of looks, and he didn't look overly comfortable shooting the ball. I'm not going to say that he couldn't shoot the ball, but he didn't look overly comfortable shooting the ball. And you were watching it thinking, is Washington going to come in for this? Is it Crandall? Is it Washington? Is it Crandall? Is it Washington? And as the game got closer, those decisions become more and more pertinent. And credit to Manchester for making it close, but effectively the game turned. I think it was a tie game with a minute and a half.
Yeah, just under 2 minutes ago, they tied it up at 82 apiece.
Yeah, and then the game turned because Leicester went on a 5-0 run. And I don't remember the two, but I do remember the
Nelson Henry underneath. It was a difficult angle for him, and he managed to somehow scoop it back in. And then Jamel knocks the ball loose at the other end.
Yeah,
run a play, and Johnson hits a 3 at the top with a minute to go.
What happened on the Nelson Henry play was that, is what I was talking about last week. Ulf was behind him, and they didn't send help quick enough. And it might sound crazy, but at that point, I'm sending a double team off Crandall, because Crandall's on the court. He hasn't really looked like he's very keen on shooting the ball. And I'm getting the ball out of Nelson Henry's hands and putting it back in Crandall's hands, which is the exact opposite of what I've been saying for the last 3 months. But that's the way the game goes. That's where injuries go, and they didn't. And Nelson Henry made what looked like a tough shot, but was a shot that you would expect him to make, because that's the shots he makes, and he's got 2 inches on off, a little bit of strength. And then they came down, and I think and Crandall ran the play for Johnson.
Yeah.
Johnson, starts the baseline, comes up, sets the screen, and pops out, and suddenly he's wide open, and he's not missing, and that's a 5-point game. And Manchester still didn't say die, to be fair.
No. And Leicester, next time they got the ball down, ran exactly the same play, got exactly the same shot, and this time Johnson missed it.
Yeah. And it's that's the reason that you have Crandall on the court, because he gets. Connor if Connor was on the court, Connor would be able to make a play, I'm sure. But it wouldn't be necessarily that play with that degree of ease for his shooter in the time. And that's why they had 54 points on Tuesday night when he wasn't on the court. And that's why Rob's got him playing today, even though he probably shouldn't be playing today. Because when it comes down to winning league titles, what happens in the last 2 minutes of main games, you want your absolute main talent and your brains on the court. And that's not knocking Connor and saying Connor isn't talent and he isn't brains. He is, but Gino is what's got them to where they've got to. And then again, Manchester just kept coming. And I like the energy and the effort that Manchester played with throughout, and not a little bit of skill as well. They needed Satchel to have a career night to stay close. Of course. So you're not going to get that every night. But they still gave it every shot that they had. And I think Owandi made another shot.
Yeah, so Whelan made two free throws to make it 84-87 with 23 seconds to go. They foul Crandall. He goes 1 for 2. And then Wandia hits a 3 with 12.4 seconds to go, and it's 87-81. They foul Johnson, who makes both free throws. So they've got 10.9 seconds left, and they need a 3. Now, Leicester, Rob, watching him over the years, tends to play defense there. He tends not to foul in that situation. But what it gives you, because they were over the limit, but what it does give you is it allows you to be aggressive. And Gino was very aggressive, knocked the ball loose, and it's scrambling about, and the seconds tick off.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been proved statistically either way. But I was always a fan of the stat that exactly the same. Someone, if we cannot defend the 3-point line, it's one thing doing it on a broken play, or if they're coming at you down the court, and you think, oh my God, he's beaten me, and you get a quick foul to stop that, to set him up. But off an inbounds pass, half court play, if we cannot defend the 3-point line to the point whereby we're willing to give up a layup, and the worst that happens is they make a Hail Mary and we still got the ball for a last shot. I live with that, as opposed to the strange things that can happen in the BBL in relation to foul shots and the offensive rebounds and all sorts of stuff. So I don't think, it only ever becomes an issue to people when it goes wrong. Yeah. Or makes when you say, well, why didn't you foul? It's never talked about the 100 times when
when
They
he
don't
didn't.
make them.
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
like what we've seen at Bristol and what we've seen today, where people have tried to scrabble off to get a 3 and end up getting nowhere near because they've tended it properly. And yeah, they didn't. What I will say is, Ulf got a rebound.
He did.
I mean, Ulf got another sodding rebound. He had 15 boards, and even at the end, that is the biggest risk for giving up a 3. That you give up that after offensive rebound, the guys turn their heads and he throws it out when he's open. And Leicester did well to kind of to stay at home on that, because the natural reaction when that first shot goes up is to go get the ball.
Yeah.
It's a wrong reaction. The reaction, what you need to be doing is, don't worry who gets the ball, just don't leave your guy in the 3-point line because we're up 3.
Yeah,
So, credit to them that they made enough plays. I mean, it's interesting, that there is 90 to 87, that game, Manchester can score. We know Leicester can score. Leicester scoring generally comes depending on their personnel, who's on the court. And it's going to be interesting down the last few games, again, to work out who gets on the court for Leicester, because today you look at it, Falzon 7 minutes, Fraser 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And Falzon made a big shot.
He did make a big shot.
And Walker 2 minutes, Washington 19 minutes. And you're looking at some of the other guys who are the main guys for them, who are having to play more and more minutes. And
Gino only played 21. You would imagine as he regains his fitness, that number will go up and up.
Yeah, and on top of that, Heron is showing kind of something that they didn't have all season. Insofar as he's got a bit of off the bounce dribble and scoring. And so where do his minutes go? Because then you've got and you always want to get Jamel in the game to shut people down.
Yeah.
To get transition stuff. So Rob's getting to that position whereby he's going to have some decisions to make on lineups as well. That they're probably good decisions, but the key thing is to make sure everybody's still bought in. They're playing 7 minutes a game, 8 minutes a game, and see how it goes.
And the important thing at this time of year is to win the game, which is what they did. So let's just have a quick glance at the table before we leave it for this week. Manchester now 7-17. They are 6 games remaining. The playoff line at the minute is 13. Bristol are 10-13, although Worcester now are also 12-13. Giants just about out of it, are they, do you think?
Well, so they can get to 13 wins. 13 wins, I think, can get you in. After Bristol, 10-13. So if Bristol win 4 out of 7, then that wouldn't get you in. I'm not sure Bristol will win 4 out of 7. I haven't checked their schedule, so I don't know. But on what they've got at the moment, they're 10-13 at the moment. So 4 out of 7 would be above what they've accomplished. So I think 13 wins could get you in. But I think you also got to look at
obviously they have to go past 2 teams to get into the
plus.
Surrey are 8-14, so they've got 1 more defeat than the teams above them. They've got games in hand though.
Yeah, they didn't get to 16
they're
wins.
only worth something if they win. They could get to 16 if they won all 8. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You see, I think again they have a realistic prospect of getting to 13. On the way that they're playing. They had the most comfortable win imaginable today. They shouldn't be afraid of anybody, the way that they're playing at the moment. So again, I think the cutoff will likely be 13. If Bristol get to 13, then it may come down to head-to-heads. Bristol or Surrey get to 14. Then obviously Manchester can't do it. So yeah, Manchester are pretty much hanging on. And it's difficult to see a team that are 7-17 winning 6 straight games, let's be honest. So very difficult for them. But we've seen today, that's Leicester with Crandall, with Walker, with everybody, and they've nearly beat them. So you can't rule them out, and you've seen Surrey beat Newcastle comfortably. Well, I think Newcastle have to play Manchester again once, so Manchester will be looking at that thinking, well, that's maybe a win that we can get that people wouldn't have expected.
And the top 4 look to be away now from the from the bottom 4, if you like. Newcastle though with 9 defeats, looking they're a bit up and down, aren't they?
Yeah, they're very up and down. I'm thinking probably looking at looking at fourth now. I don't think anybody else has got. Everybody else has got 12. I think, is that right?
Yeah.
So difficult to see them dropping below fourth. Difficult to see them climbing above fourth, though, given the way that Plymouth are playing at the moment, and they've finished their games against both Plymouth and London, so they've got no. They can't make up any games by winning that.
No.
They've got to find, as I say, they've got to find rotations in relation to which guys to play and when. I think that's they're going through some droughts at the moment, which is causing them some difficulties on the court at certain times, and they've all got to be ready to play. And as I say today, it was about as disappointing in relation to a number of guys on the court. They just didn't appear to be locked into the game or ready to play. And that might sound easy to say. But they didn't make shots, therefore they're not ready to play. How can you say that? It's more about the demeanour on the court. The focus in relation to if you're missing layups early, if you're scrambling out or you're not scrambling out, how active you are, how much are you communicating, how much of a footprint are you putting on the game. And that's what I didn't see from most of them. I saw it from Fletch and I saw it from Defoe when he came in, but that's kind of the experienced guys. They know this is what's got to happen. Some of the other guys, they really didn't do that. So we'll see where they go. We'll see where they go.
And the title, Leicester, I've already mentioned the next 4 games are Worcester, Plymouth, Newcastle, London. Obviously, London has to beat them to if Leicester wins that game, then that's that. But Leicester probably need at least 2 out of those 4, do they, just to be? If they lose to London.
So. I think so, because they have Glasgow to play.
Yeah, they have Glasgow and Cheshire are their last 2.
Well, they're not losing to Glasgow, and if they have to go to Cheshire to win the league, they're not losing that game. I know, having been involved in games where at the end of the season, there are certain games that a team who needs to win against a team who doesn't need to win is just not. There's only one way that game is going, and even the team who needs, even for instance, if Cheshire were playing for 6th place, that doesn't count as needing to win. The same way it would as if you were playing to win the league. So they have those 2 kind of games as a fallback. So if they are 1 win up on London prior to those 2 games, they will win the league. In my mind, there's absolutely no question about that. So London have to catch them before then, which means that basically Leicester have to lose 3 of the next 4.
Yeah.
And obviously 1 will be against London. So in reality, they have to lose 2 of the next 3 against Worcester, Newcastle, and
Plymouth, which is eminently possible.
It would be until you've seen Newcastle go down to Surrey today and got beat by 21. The Plymouth game will be really interesting because they beat Plymouth twice, but Plymouth weren't what they are.
No.
And then they beat them over kind of Christmas and January twice.
Yeah.
And that will be interesting because Plymouth will be trying to prove a point in that game pending the playoffs.
Also there's that massive streak where they haven't beaten them for about 10
years.
Yeah,
of course, which is obviously a far more interest to statisticians. But yeah, so it's what I think, it's still the ballad of Gino's wrist. Every way you look at this, it's ultimately it's a different. If Crandall is 100% healthy, there is no question that Leicester win this league, and they probably win it before they play Glasgow and before they play Cheshire. If he isn't, and he's at kind of that 60%, 60-70%, whereby he can play and he can positively impact the game, it becomes a bit more interesting. Because that, as I say, that causes ripples in relation to who plays and when they play, and how that impacts the other guys as well. It becomes a spinning plates, juggling ball situation, which you don't like to have as a coach, because you're looking for the least worst option as opposed to what you want your team to be like.
Yeah.
The way you want your team to play. You know who you want playing. You know who you want to get these minutes. And you can't quite do it because someone's just coming back from injury, like Ashley was in the cup final, on the trophy final, or because someone's kind of half fit or 3/4 fit, but is still capable of helping you. And you have to basically, throw your eggs into a basket on Easter Sunday, and say this is my group. You can't procrastinate about it. You can't go half measures, just like Rob did today. Look, Gino's my guy. I need him in at the end. 60, that's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to be. That's fine. but you can't have that self-doubt is difficult. So if he's healthy, they win easy. If he's not, or if somebody decides, for instance, on Wednesday night as he's driving down the lane to give him a hard foul on his right hand, just slap down on the ball, hit the ball, hit his hand, whatever, who knows? These things it's a physical sport, and all sorts of things can happen. It's a bounce.
Indeed. Well,
I'm not saying anyone should do that.
No. There's plenty.
But we've all been there. You go for a layup, you fall down, you put your hand on the ground.
Well, there was the one where he took the unsportsmanlike and he landed hard and he went straight out of the game after the free throws, and you were wondering, I wonder what that was. And then he looked like he got some treatment, came back in. These things can happen anywhere, can't they? Anyway, that will do us for this week. There's still plenty of excitement left, despite the end of the season now limbering up into view, which is quite exciting. So we will park it there. And thank you very much for listening. We'll be back with you again next Sunday. Goodbye.